Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is May 10th, 2018. I am Patrick Rogers, and I'm joined by all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Got another great call. I'm privately viewing. No, I'm not the presenter. One of these days, I'm going to learn how all this works. All right, before we get started, real quick, we're just going to talk about what this call is for folks who might be new to the call or new to watching the videos. We're part of the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and we started these special interest group calls so we can have a little bit tighter, more focused conversation around different areas of interest. In our case, that's client-side development related to SharePoint. That includes SharePoint Framework and associated development patterns, as well as development with the Patterns and Practices PnP JS libraries. Those libraries are emphasizing simple, repeatable, tested designs to really help you out with your applications and save you a lot of time just writing plumbing code and focus on what you want to do versus exactly how you need to do it or how you need to form the little JSON bodies and so forth. Two links down there at the bottom, aka SPFx-Community, will take you to the Microsoft Tech Community section or area for SharePoint. That is a great place to ask general SharePoint development questions, whether those questions are about SharePoint Framework or about more classic development patterns, or really just how would you design, or I have this problem I'm trying to solve, what are some good approaches I could take? So those kind of general development questions are really great for the tech community there. And then, see, somebody says no audio. Can folks hear me? I just want to double check. Yep. Okay, great. And then the second link there, aka MSSPDev-Docs, will take you to the developer documentation for all things SharePoint. So again, if you're just getting started with SharePoint Framework and want to get spun up on that, there's great tutorials starting from Hello World all the way through to some of the more advanced stuff. As well as the documentation around add-in development, classic SharePoint development, by which I mean like the solution packages and so forth. All of our development documents for SharePoint are moving to that link. So do check that stuff out. And again, if you're looking to get started in SharePoint Framework, which I'd highly recommend, you're going to see a lot of the Microsoft development patterns moving towards the way SharePoint Framework is doing things. So maybe not necessarily exactly the same, but those ideas of client-side development, Yeoman generator, and things like that, that's going to be time well spent to learn those topics if you are a developer for SharePoint or a developer for just Microsoft 365 in general. Our agenda for today, engineering update on SharePoint Framework. We'll have a quick update on the client-side libraries. We've got updates on the CLI as well as the reusable client controls. And then we've got two demos today, one from Hugo on a student budget planning tool. So this is kind of a whole application, really, showing off a lot of different stuff. It's very cool. Look forward to seeing that. And then Vasis is going to give us a little rundown on some build announcements and as well as demos of the stuff in those announcements. And you saw a little bit of that teased on the monthly call Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. And then we've got some Q&A and open discussion possibly at the end. And before we get to all that, I do want to talk about some opportunities to contribute. So if you're interested in being a little more active in patterns and practices in general or around the client-side development side of things, the way to do it is just to start doing it, honestly. Demo something on this call, so you could demo a SharePoint Framework solution, demo an app PnP or a PnP JS in a project, or both of those things together. You can demo, of course, anything client-side related in SharePoint, so maybe you're doing some stuff outside of SharePoint Framework. Of course, we encourage you to use SharePoint Framework, but no requirement. Would love to see that stuff too. All those demos are great. Love to learn about all the great stuff folks are doing out there. And it's a great way for you to get more involved and to show off the work you're doing. And it really does help the community, because I know I learn something new pretty much every time I see a demo, so that's always very exciting. You can also contribute on GitHub. So you can contribute by submitting a pull request to fix an issue or a documentation bug. there was a pull request the other day to fix a spelling error. Love it. I really appreciate it. I mean, it seems small, but it's a big help. Obviously, I missed it. My spelling's terrible, but every little thing helps make us better, all better as a community together. So very much appreciate every contribution we get. And then as well, excuse me, if you find issues, please do report those to the issues list. If they're a PnP JS issue, that would go to the PnP JS issue list. And if it's a SharePoint framework issue, that would go to the SPDev docs issue list on GitHub. So SharePoint SPDev docs will get you that issues list. And we really do appreciate all those issues that you get reported, and we try and fix those or address those just as quickly as we can. We're also going to really look forward to any feedback that you have about the work we're doing, either these calls, SharePoint patterns and practices all up, the specific libraries, whether we could have different samples, more samples, enhanced samples, better guidance, documentation. All that kind of feedback is really fantastic, and we very much appreciate it. We can't always act on it immediately just because of time and all those sorts of constraints, but really do appreciate it. And again, it really makes everything better in the community for everybody to get that feedback and then to build on that feedback. So I'll pass things off now to Vesa for an update on SharePoint Framework.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. So it is a Microsoft Build Week. We had an awesome 3 days in the Seattle Convention Center, and probably, if you're a SharePoint guy and have been following what's happening, probably seen that there haven't been humongous amount of external communications on the SharePoint development topics. That's one of the reasons for that one is that the SPC is coming pretty soon. But on the other hand, we also announced stuff in the Tuesday session. So I had a session on Tuesday afternoon where we announced new stuff. So I'm going to demo those after Hugo's demo today, but I'm going to mention some of the roadmap stuff as we move along within the slides before that. I just want to make sure that Hugo has his opportunity to do the demo properly, because I tend to take too much time anyway, and everybody knows that, then that's fine. So a few things on the SharePoint framework side, like covered already. SPDev docs, please. Well, first of all, this is the official documentation location. I promised to mention this one in every single community call that we're having. So if you're looking into any guidance, tutorials, everything else, it is AKMS SPDev docs, and from there you can find community details, you can find our open source details, you can find SPFx details, and all of the other documentation what is available. MSDN will be shut down by end of June, which is slightly horrifying considering that MSDN is MSDN. But the docs.microsoft.com platform is taking over, and you are able to contribute on these things as well. Now, issue list, typical slide also from this community call. So if you run into any development issues, API issues, it's not just only for SharePoint framework issues, SPDev docs, SPDev issues, and that will redirect you to the issue list in the SPDev docs issue list, report an issue there. Now, if you do have a Premier support, some of you are potentially working for enterprise customers and they might have a Premier support contract. Technically, that is still the preferred way of opening up any critical issues, absolutely. And this is mainly for making sure that if you run into a critical issue and it seems to be, you can't get that solved, we can use this issue list together with the community, but also we in engineering, we triage this typically 2 to 3 times in a week. So if there's any actual issues in SPFx, we actually solve them. If there are questions which you can actually answer immediately, we help on that as well. This week has been slightly an exception on that because personally I've at least been quite busy with build and podcast recordings in builds and sessions and workshops and all of that stuff. So we'll get back on track on the issue list pretty soon. And I absolutely agree on Todd's comment. Never would have seen a day where MSDN disappeared. That's slightly horrifying, but it is what it is. So we're moving to MSDN is super old platform. Docs.microsoft.com is a new platform where you can actually submit contributions and typo fixes or actual articles as well, which is super cool. Good. What else? And advertisement, Las Vegas, SharePoint conference, Las Vegas is coming in 2 weeks or 1.5 weeks, starting from this pre-day workshop is in 20th of May. on Sunday. And there is actually pretty nasty competition on this workshop because there's AC has its own mastering SharePoint framework development workshop, and then we have this one where we have Pat Miller, who's the engineering manager behind of SharePoint framework. There's me, there's some Squires, and Bert and Luca explaining our vision related on SharePoint framework and the architectural thinking. Now, we understand that this is a complete miss, that we're overlapping with AC, because in a best case scenario, we would be actually absolutely working together, and that is our intention in the future. But in future, we'll get it fixed for this time, and you can choose if you are more an architect, you don't want to be hands-on, dirty on code level, potentially this is what you want to do. But then if you want to get your hands dirty in the React code level, then the AC's training is absolutely the right place to be as well. Anyway, we always work together, and so we are promoting stuff together with AC and Voitanos cross because it's a win-win for everybody. So anyway, and code isn't dirty. Yes, that's fair. I'm not a native English-speaking person, so I do apologize for a strange statement. Anyway. Cool. On the growth of SharePoint Framework, I've been using these as to show you the usage and growth of SharePoint Framework in SharePoint Framework platform. So this one, I updated this slightly, so I included also the usage per tenant growth, and this is a charts from last September until is this Tuesday? This is actually this is Sunday, until Sunday this week, previous week, or this week, depending on the country. Now, this is only for third-party customization, so only for third-party web parts and SharePoint Framework and their usage growth in SharePoint Online. So you can easily see that we have now pretty much multiplied by 5 the usage since September, which is pretty cool. I can't give you an exact number. Most likely we'll give some numbers potentially in SPC, but I'm not allowed to give you an exact number how many tenants and how many users in monthly are using SharePoint Framework, but it is a significant number, let's put it this way. So it is surprisingly big number. So if you're kind of wondering, is this the platform, is this the technology, or is Microsoft going to introduce another application development model? Answer is no, we're not, because we're building SharePoint Online, the modern SharePoint Online using SharePoint Framework as well. So that will give you the let's say, confirmation that we're not going to get rid of this. And then this is absolutely used by other developers as well. On Bill Ayer's question, I cannot actually explain the exact number on this one. Cool. Now, some roadmap things, and then let's have Hugo's demo on the SPFx web part, and then go back on the having some of these announcements from Build and see them live in a live demo, and I can answer on the questions on those as we move along within the demo. So this is now the updated roadmap, which we announced in Build in Tuesday afternoon. Now it's Thursday, yes. And it's also in social media. I think we shared that one there as well. Now, what we will be concentrating, I'm going to actually do a marker. You can theoretically see what I'm drawing here. So let me actually do this. So native graph access for SharePoint Framework. So this one we started the preview on mid-February. Now, some of you might have hoped and crossed the fingers that we will go live to production ready in SPC. That does not, however, happen. And we do apologize on that one, but we need to have slightly more time on making this bulletproof for the future. So right now, well, we can pretty much promise, but I'm not going to put my head on this one statement. The GA for native graph access and the web API, third-party web API secret core will happen by Ignite. Now, not by SPC. We do apologize. That will have an impact potentially on our planning, but realities are that we can't right now ship it because we might need to still do some API level changes, and we can't do those if we go GA. So that's really the reasons. Now, the next thing, enterprise solutions in SharePoint to Microsoft Teams. I'm going to do a live demo on this one, but basically what it means is that in the future, it's not available right now, but in the future, when you implement a SharePoint Framework web part, it is actually also a tab in Microsoft Teams. So you write your stuff once, and you can actually surface the same solution as a web part in SharePoint, or as a tab in Microsoft Teams. You don't have to worry about where it's getting hosted, and sure, your code can actually read the context if that is needed. So you can actually read the context of Microsoft Teams, and you can you get the information like the Teams name and additional information on Teams if you're getting hosted on Teams. If you're getting hosted on SharePoint, you will get the SharePoint context. But you have API access on all of this context, and it's a one code base which will be executed in both sides. And that is absolutely a major, because this means that this is also showing you the direction where we are gradually starting to move in the future, which is let's consolidate. Why is there a completely different development model for Teams, SharePoint, Office add-ins, whatever planners, and blah, 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 blah? How about we introduce Office 365 development framework? Because obviously SharePoint framework is not a good name if you use it in Teams as well. And then we start expanding that usage, and because the tooling works, we started expanding that usage across all of the other platforms. So now if you know how to do development in SharePoint framework, you know how to do development in Teams. You know how to do development in other services, potentially in the future as well. And that's, yay, woohoo, mind-blowing. Now, enterprise solutions in SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, potential renaming at some point, we'll see. Not yet any official statements on that. Now, we get the enterprise solutions from SharePoint to be visible in Teams, but we actually do this upside down as well. So in the Teams side, we have actually ISV solutions which are not available in SharePoint. So we actually flipped the tunnel to upside down as well. So by Ignite, we'll absolutely preview this latest in Ignite. We will be able to add ISV applications which are in the tab selection in Teams as a functionalities in SharePoint side as well, which is super cool. I have to say on the Patrick's comments and Gary's comment that yes, the Microsoft 365 framework or dev framework, I don't know, Microsoft framework, I don't know. Maybe we'll bundle Office 365, the Office UI Fabric underneath the same umbrella, and then we call it something smart, and who knows. Now, global deployment of SharePoint framework extensions word was actually, well, kind of missing from there. We're looking into expanding that as well. What it means is that you can centrally push your SharePoint framework extensions to be available in a tenant. What it means basically is that if you have a footer or header application placeholder, you're able to say from a central location in the app catalog or within your solution that this footer should be available in all of the communication sites in the tenant, or all of the modern team sites in a tenant as well. And that's really cool, because now you don't have to worry about how do you light up the extension within the individual site collections. Or if you need to push a list view commandlet button to a certain lists or list types in your tenant, you just centrally configure that, hey, this button should be available across all of the document libraries in my tenant, and snap of a fingers, good to go. And you can always go and disable that, and you can always go and enable stuff. And I'll come back on actually that Angular comment in a second, so we get that one tackled as well. Now, dynamic data in SharePoint Framework Components. This is basically an announcement which we did this year in the build, which is exactly the same announcement pretty much as we did last year in build, which is kind of awkward. Because last year in build we said, now the web part connections will be available, and we never shipped it. So I do apologize on that mistake, but dynamic data is basically SharePoint Framework Components to Components connections. And it's no longer limited on web parts, and it's no longer limited on components to components. So you can actually have a extension which is dependent on the scope of the page or of a list. And what I mean with that one is that you can use the dynamic data platform to get access on the context of a list item, as an example, or a list, and then your extension or a web part can start behaving differently. Or you can have a connection to other web part, and then the other web parts, based on selections of other web part, the second web part will then change its behavior, or extension will change its behavior. So that's why we call it dynamic data rather than web part to web part connections, because it's not just web part to web part connections. Cool. Replacement of MSDN is docs.microsoft.com. Now, SharePoint Framework will be in SharePoint 2019, including the modern experiences. So we will fork, or the fork of SharePoint Online has happened pretty recently, a while back, and the SharePoint 2019 will support that SharePoint Framework version, which was included within the fork. So we will be releasing SharePoint Framework 1.5 sooner or later. That is targeted for SharePoint Online. So SharePoint Server 2019 will support, and so it seems, I can't confirm that right now, 1.4.1 version, which is great because that means that you can actually use the same extensions, same web parts, and all of that in on-premises in SharePoint 2019 whenever we ship that to be available. Timeline for getting SharePoint 2019 out for beta will be announced in the SPC within 1.5 weeks. So I can't share any dates at this point, which is pretty understandable. Now, there was a good question, good comment on the IM chat. There's a lot of chatting here, which is brilliant. But I want to actually jump on the Angular question. When will SharePoint Framework support Angular? It actually has supported Angular from day one. So it's not about SharePoint Framework supporting Angular or not. The difference is that we haven't had a Yeoman template default scaffolding included in the Yeoman templating. Just as well, you've been able to create a Node JavaScript framework from the Yeoman templates and then include Angular or Angular Elements now or Angular 6.0 or Angular JS inside of your solution. Absolutely supported from day one. Now, we do have even some documentation on that area. So the whole point is that if we want to have Angular elements as a selection in a Yeoman templates, that's a different discussion. And we're looking into making that happen. And some of you might know, and we've been pretty open on this one, we've been having meetings with Angular elements teams and Angular development team pretty frequently. And yes, it is Microsoft meeting Google, which is pretty mind-blowing as well. So with Rob Wormald and other guys talking about when they will be releasing their stuff and how we will be integrating that to SharePoint Framework and how do we actually get that guidance available. Now, our current plan of a record is that we have certain, let's say, bugs in our current Yeoman template structure, which we need to get solved. Immediately when those are solved, and there is a high-level schedule which I can't share for that one right now, and immediately when those are getting solved, we can actually introduce an open source extension on top of the out-of-the-box Yeoman templates. Due reasons or another, we cannot actually go open source with an out-of-the-box Yeoman templates immediately, but we can actually add an extension on that. And if you followed up on what Stefan Bauer has been releasing every now and then, his advanced rocket science scenarios, he's actually explaining how this will work pretty much in the future. Now, what it means is that we'll come up with a open source Yeoman extension, which will have a dependency on out-of-the-box Yeoman template, but that open source Yeoman template will then have the support for include, let's say, Vue, handlebars, Angular elements, whatever we want, and we can build that together with you people from the community. And that's then also making sure that we actually can be more agile, because the engineering, when something is being shipped by us from SharePoint Engineering, we need to actually have pretty high quality bar, or making sure that the APIs are getting locked and everything else is getting locked. When we do that as an open source, yes, the quality bar still is there, but there are hundreds of people who can potentially participate on making sure that the quality bar of that open source solution is available. And so we're looking into making this happen and starting to move using this kind of a thinking forward within upcoming weeks or months. I'm crossing fingers that we get that certain bugs fixed in the out-of-the-box Yeoman templates for SPFx, and we can actually unblock the whole thing. Cool. And yes, Vincent, we'll have the black box in the middle, but we can easily also document the black box in the middle, and you will get the elements. And trust me, if you ask me anything around the black box, guess what? I have access on source code because I'm in engineering, and we can help you on the questions. So whenever we start this journey of an extension on top of the out-of-the-box Yeoman templates, we will make sure that you know how that will work, and will absolutely help the community on making this happen for the future. So, all good. Good, and potentially and hopefully it's let's work that together with a community, not competing solutions and libraries and generators.
And a little bit of background behind this. I met with a friend a while ago, just before I offered Vesa to present this, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm looking into the SPFx, but it doesn't look like it's ready for prime time. I don't know if I'm ready to put it in production." We actually have put SPFx in production with a large college here in Canada, where we have over 20,000 students connecting to a student portal, and everything in the student portal is built using SPFx. So from my perspective, SPFx is absolutely ready for prime time. And while I'm presenting, I wanted to say to the SPFx team, you guys have done a great job. Thank you for enabling us to do awesome solutions. I'll start by demoing the solution, and I'll show behind the scenes how we built this. So this is a budget tool that allows the students to actually go in and edit their budget. And one thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to allow students to actually do this in a mobile way, in a responsive way, but also an accessible way, because we absolutely have to consider accessibility for our students. And the problem that we had when we started this is we really couldn't find Office UI Fabric, and we really wanted people to look at every component that we built and to not be able to tell whether it was actually out of the box in SharePoint or whether it was actually custom built. So we started looking at, okay, how are we going to build a solution that allows the students to do rich text edit, or not rich text, but rich editing of a spreadsheet. So what you're actually looking at here, and hopefully you can see this, is I'm able to actually move around using my keyboard, just like I would in a regular spreadsheet. I'm able to tab around, and I'll tab to the next tab. I'm able to move between sections. I'm able to edit any section, and as you can hopefully see at the top, as I edit things, the numbers are changing dynamically. The other thing that we've done is we wanted some interesting context options. So for example, if I'm lazy and I don't want to have to enter the same amount for, let's say, mortgage every month, I can actually just enter and say, okay, copy this value across. Or if I really don't want to think about my doing math, I should be able to just say, split this value across, and it'll actually split the values across the spreadsheet. So really making it easy for students to be able to enter the budget. They can add as many rows as they want, and they can delete rows and do all sorts of stuff like that. So really, again, we wanted an experience that was rich for our students to be able to build this budget. And of course, they can click around. Of course, now that I'm trying to show it, I can't do it. And there you go. They can click around and see how they're doing on a month-by-month basis. And wow, this is a pretty awesome student. He's got a huge cash flow. That never happens in real life. But so where do we take the inspiration from this before we start? So we started with this Excel spreadsheet that I believe is just a standard out-of-the-box Excel spreadsheet when you go File, New in Excel. But it's the same behavior, basically, where you can then go and edit stuff, and it automatically updates everything. So behind the scene, if we look at the code, the one thing that I want to show is that, like any well-behaved React developer, we're supposed to be to separate things into individual components, and each component is really responsible for doing one thing. So I have my donut chart, my line chart, my spark line, and then I have things like an individual editable cell, an editable number cell, which only allows the students to enter numbers, as well as rows and tables and things like that. Now the problem is, what happens when you have components like this that all put together. So if you think about, for example, an editable table consists of one or more editable rows, and each editable row consists of one or more editable cell. Some cells that are number cells, some cells that are regular cells for the text. And the challenge with when you start breaking your components into individual components like that is the amount of stuff that you have to pass back and forth. If you think about it, and if you're trying to design something that you want each component to have very little concept of the context that they're in. So how do you do that? And this is where MobX comes in. Now, I apologize. Like VESA, English is my second language. I don't know if that's how you actually say it, but when I say MobX, I'm talking about this thing here. And MobX was actually built it was actually started, the inspiration for it was actually a spreadsheet. They wanted the ability to create spreadsheet-like functionality and allow individual components to be able to talk to each other without having to pass the messages back and forth, through their parents, or having to copy all the properties and all the props and the state information, all that stuff back and forth between the elements. So MobX has concept of events that modify states, and then the state changes actually create computed values. And these computed values are, as you'll see in my code, computed values are the places where I have all the sums, all the totals for every line item, and all the monthly totals, and all the grand totals. And then you have reactions, so things that you can do at every time that something happens. So if I go back to my code, and obviously this is not a course on MobX, so I'm not going to talk about it too long, but if you go to my code, let me just look at an example here. Pretty much every item has, if I look at the types here, so some of the things like the cells and things like that have very little concept of what they're, they don't know that they're inside of a budget, they just know that they're in a line. If I look at a line, or a row, for example, the row knows that it's actually part of a section, it's part of a line, but really the one secret here is it's passing around a store, and the store is actually being passed pretty much to every element. And there's actually a way in MobX that you can automatically pass your store between elements. But that's the key here in MobX, is that you can create a store object or many store objects, and the store is responsible for kind of taking care of the state management and the calculated values and things like that. So this is an example here, and I don't want to get in trouble here. I am updating my reference to the PnP framework. That's actually, I'm going to be doing that before I submit this code sample. So I have values that are observable, and observable values are really things that when I change them, I'm notifying the other elements in the app that things got changed. And then I have computed values, and computed values are things that are automatically calculated. So for example, the label for a month, the totals, the income totals, and so on and so forth. The one thing I wanted to do here with this spreadsheet is we didn't want anything to be hard-coded or anything to be, things like starts. The budgets for students usually starts in September, but we wanted the ability to actually start different months and have budgets for longer than 12 months and things like that. So this store handles things like that. One of the things that we do is we have an auto-run action that happens every. Sorry.
I think that feels
Hugo,
like a...
Yeah, Hugo, it seems like we might have lost your audio.
Okay, can you hear me?
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. That was a network issue, clearly. So.
Okay. So I have auto-run actions that automatically happen when relevant items in the store change. So I don't have to worry about what items change and what triggers an auto-run. I can just tell it that this is an auto-run, and because the computed values are already defined and the observable values are already defined, auto-run will determine every time something changes, it'll wait about 300 milliseconds for other changes, and it'll automatically save the budget. Now, when I save the budget, one thing that I did here, and I'm sure that some purists would disagree with me, I actually built the logic for loading and storing and creating new budget all in the store. I could have probably separated the services to saving and loading in a different service object. That's the way I like to do it. It'll actually create the budget automatically, but one thing it'll do, if I go behind the scene and I show you the site content here, so my budgets, in my case, it's obviously set up so it saves as the student or as the user of the budget. And again, this is a choice that I'm sure other people would have different opinions. We chose to save the JSON directly in a data object. We could have saved it as an attachment. We just wanted to be able to query directly the JSON. And the one thing I want to do, a little tip here, if there's one piece of advice that I would give you, is if you're building something that has a schema that will be evolving over time, that you're saving back and forth, do yourself a favor and save a schema version as you're doing it, so that if you ever add new items in your schema later, you can just write code to handle, oh, this object was saved in this version of the schema, so that means at the time they didn't have this particular set of information, or whatever it is. You can write the code to handle these kinds of exceptions. Let me delete my budget for a second. I know I worked really hard to put this budget together, but let me delete the budget so you can see the behavior that happens when a new student comes in. If the demo gods are with me, it'll start with something like this. So this is obviously our awesome placeholder controller. If you click on Get Started, it'll actually go behind the scene, and hopefully everybody can see this. It'll go behind the scene. It'll get all the list of sections and line items, and it'll actually create a little introduction on how to get started. So I can actually say next, and it'll talk about the various sections. I won't spend too much time on this, but it walks the student through, or the user through, all the sections and how to use it. So it'll actually show them demonstrations of how to use the menu and things like that. And then we get started. Behind the scene, if you look at what's automatically happened, again, it went back to one budget. It automatically saved the budget, so it actually knows that I have gone through the tutorial. It knows at what step in the tutorial it was. And this is the actual sections that it went and looked for. So it looked for these sections and inserted these sections in my budget. And if I go back to the content, the line items, and all the line items here are configurable as well. So I can say, okay, in the income section, I'm going to have these items here, which is what you should see when you start the budget. So that's a really quick overview of what we've built using SPFx and MobX. I'm actually going to be submitting this as a sample solution in the SPDev web parts samples. I just have to make a couple tweaks. One is update the PnP library, and the second one is I'm using the height charts chart here. And the height charts, when we built the solution, it was for a not-for-profit or an education scenario. And HighCharts is free for non-commercial use, but you have to pay for commercial use. So I'm opening it to the participants here. Do you think it's worthwhile for me to change this to use a chart tool that you don't have to pay for, or are you okay with using a chart tool that you have to pay for? And yes, I will actually have at my Tahoe ninjas.blog, there will be a full tutorial on how to build this. And if you've ever read my blogs, I have a tendency to go on and on because I don't ever assume that people know anything.
Yeah. So on this one actually, so Hugo, so we did have a interesting scenario related on Textbox.io.
Yes.
Which had exactly the same licensing, and they then apparently didn't like the fact that we had a community sample on using their library, even though it was not for commercial use because it's community sample. So we needed to pull all of the samples from GitHub related on Textbox.io. So,
I agree.
So just for the sake of it, I think it's better to be careful and use whatever MIT licensed stuff if possible.
Okay, so I'll make those changes. I will upload them to the or do a pull request. I have another sample that's coming up too, which is using the RSS feeds, iCals, WordPress, and any type of calendar feeds, and it actually renders it in a calendar that looks exactly like the out-of-the-box SharePoint calendar. So that's coming up soon too.
Cool. Thank you, Hugo. I'm actually stealing your sharing because I want to do 2 quick demos. So we get these one recorded as well because I promised to quickly show this in the roadmap slide as well. But I think thank you, Hugo. That's absolutely brilliant stuff. And somebody was asking, will the guidelines library sample be included in the sample? So how do you show the guidance for the end users?
Yeah, I'll include everything,
Cool.
and I'll show how to customize it.
Yep, and technically, so we do have also SPDev solutions where we actually have more, let's say, fine-tuned end-to-end solutions. So this could actually fall on that category as well. But we can have that discussion offline, where what is the relations in the store, the sample. But quickly, because I'm conscious about the time, we will go slightly on top of the time. But I want to show 2 demos, and then we can close up the webcast for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hugo. Excellent. So now, 2 things what I wanted to quickly show. So one thing which is super cool is the tenant-wide extensions. So quickly explaining this one, tenant-wide extensions is a way to push your extensions across the tenant automatically from a centralized location. The centralized location is the app catalog, and inside of your SPPKG file, you can actually get this done automatically, what I'm doing now manually. So there's a list which is tenant-wide extensions. So if I go to the group site, if I do refresh on this one, let's actually refresh so we don't actually see any extensions. So just double checking that one. Let's do a refresh here as well. No extensions visible, no headers, no footers. We're all clear. So now, the tenant-wide extensions means that you as a developer or as a tenant owner, you can actually configure your extensions to be available across the tenant. So I'm going to add a new item on this list, and I'm going to copy some information from a different location. So basically, I'm adding here my footer. I'm adding a component ID. I'm going to zoom in a second. I'm also adding a configuration for this ID, for this extension. So there's a dynamic configuration for this extension. Then we need to also remember to put the location for the user custom action, so I can actually do that as well. We could also do the sequence, and I'm going to zoom in so you can more easily see what we actually did here. So title is just a title. That's not actually that interesting. The component ID is the manifest ID of the extensions which we will light up. The component properties are the ones which we then bypass for the instance. We're able to target these extensions to be available only in a certain web template. Technically, communication site or a modern team site, or if it's a list view commandlet, you can target that to a specific list template. So you're able to filter what's available where automatically across the tenant. And now if I click save, boom. The whole thing is immediate. So if I now go to the group site, if we do a refresh, we added one extension here, which is part of and really cool end-to-end portal sample, which will be announced in SPC. Where is actually my repo? Where is my sample? Don't fail on me now. 1, 2, 3. Yes, there we go. So in here, you can actually see that if I zoom down, there's a footer with contacts, legal policies, and tools. Please do remember to mute yourself. There's quite a lot of background noise on the sound. I don't know who it is. And you can actually see these company-wide links, which are then visible for all of the people within a company. Now, what this extension also does, and this will be an open source example, which you will get to use in the pretty soon, I can actually go edit my links. And I can add my links here. So let's call this my search tool. And my favorite search tool is obviously Bing. So adding that one in, and let's add another one, my important site, and add that one to the my links as well. So delivered to Microsoft.com. This is using SPFx reusable controls. So the stuff what is being released from a PnP side, those reusable controls in the content. Adding those in, this is reusable controls in here. If I save this one, we can actually see that my links were saved, a message, and then we see a new item in here, which is called my links. So now, if I drop in here, we can actually see those personalized links. And what's really cool about the tenant-wide deployment is that because we configured this footer to be available across the tenant, I can go to any site within this tenant, and because there was no filtering, I'll just refresh, and magically the same extension is getting rendered. We can see the company-wide links with tools and also my links, which were the ones which I just created fly for this particular footer. And that's actually pretty cool, isn't it? Woohoo! Now, the second thing, and I do know and apologize, we slightly ran out of time, but all good, which I wanted to quickly show is the SPFx components or a web part as a tab inside of the themes. So here we have a web part in a SharePoint site. So this is a web part. Basically, you might think this as I have a custom application, but it has two different ways of surfacing that in the Office 365. One way, surfacing this a custom application, which in this case shows documents from a list, is this web part way of exposing the solution. And I can filter, and there's a configuration for the web part, which I can then modify. Now, the same web part, because it has been deployed to the SPP, to the app catalog in the tenant, and it is enabled to be also exposed as a tab in the Microsoft Teams. You are able to then get the same web part available in your Teams site. So if I go to a tab selection, on the manifest file, I can actually see my legal matters in here. So I can click the legal matters and install that application to a Teams tab. Because it had custom configurations, there we go. We can actually also configure those settings totally in the same way as a web part property pane. You can configure this. Most likely this looks slightly different when we will ship this, but this is the current setup for configuring the solution. Apply, save, and voila, we have added our application, which is being surfaced as a tab to the Microsoft Teams. And it is exactly the same code base, exactly the same functionality. It is automatically hosted from SharePoint because we're using the asset packaging and Office 365 CDNs if you want, and all of that automatically. So you don't need to worry about where the JavaScript files are getting hosted, where the other stuff is getting hosted. And that's super, super cool, no doubt. That was really super fast, and I do apologize from a timing perspective. I'm probably missing quite a few questions. At this point, let's flip back on the slides. I will see if there's any urgent questions. We will keep on answering all of these questions in the follow-up community calls as well. There is a build video on channel 9 where I more detailed actually explain how things actually work and also explain these things. There is I think that one has like 5 different demos concerning things. Good. Just quickly scanning through. No urgent questions on this one. So have a look on more detailed demos from that channel 9 link. I wasn't actually aware that the build session already went live, so good to know that. Thank you, Leo, for sharing that one. I think we went 5 minutes over the time. We do apologize. We're trying to get this more aligned and more scoped. It is also on me not talk too much on these calls. On Hugo's case, thank you, Hugo, for excellent demo. Absolutely brilliant demo. Absolutely brilliant implementation on SPFx. And you will hear more around all of the SharePoint build announcements in SPC. We'll have a blog post coming out on SharePoint dev announcements from build today, which will walk through some of this stuff as well. There is no ETA for the release, but it is coming relatively soon. So some of this stuff is coming out relatively soon, but we can't give you a date yet because we don't know if we need to still delay the date slightly. Now, excellent. No Q&A this time. We do apologize. We need to get this sorted out for following calls. But thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for your contributions. Next SharePoint Framework JavaScript meeting is on May 24th. The next general SharePoint Dev SIG is on following week. The May 24th is the week of SharePoint conference. So we'll see how do we deal with this one, because I think I will be at least flying across Atlantic during the May 24th. But I think Patrick will be at least available, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll figure it out, and we'll have additional demos available there. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for your super valuable contributions and feedback, so we know what we need to prioritize in the engineering and also in open source work. Thank you, everybody. Recording will be available within 24 hours. Bye-bye.